everybody. This is Jeff with Returning to Eden. Dr. Dina Dye will not be joining us today. She's getting busy for, she's Jewish, therefore she's getting prepared for the festival season, which would be the Feast of Trumpets, the Feast of Sukkot, and also the Feast of Yom Kippur. All of those festivals of the Lord are on the table. We're in that season, and of course I'll be preparing as well. But I do have a special guest. I want to introduce you to Mr. Michale Ortega. Now, before I do that, I'm going to give you a little bit of information about Mr. Ortega. Michael and I met about 3 years ago. We're going to have a little bit of fun telling you about that. And he is a former Catholic priest. We live in the same community. It wasn't until I took him to dinner one afternoon that we found common ground. And I'm going to explain that a little bit more later on. But I wanted to start by introducing Michale Ortega, and I want to talk a little bit about his early years, how he became a Catholic priest, and also he is now the creator of Strike Force of Prayer, which is becoming a global online prayer ministry, and he's going to talk a lot about that as the latter part of the show. So, Michale Ortega, welcome to Returning to Eden. How are you, sir?
Thank you, Jeff. Great. I feel good and ready to roll. So let's do whatever we can now.
So just to give you guys an idea of what he's talking about, we've been trying to put this broadcast together for going on 2 hours now. We've had a lot of technical issues, but all in good fun and in service to the King. Michael, you just had a birthday. You celebrated your 77th birthday a couple of days ago. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. So the 2nd of September, right?
Okay.
I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot and gone through a lot, and I've enjoyed every bit of it. I have no regrets about anything that has happened in my life. I really don't. I feel guilt-free. I have no guilt. I have no shame. I have no embarrassment. You can ask me as much as you want about my life, and I will share it with you as openly as I can. Barring anything that I'm told not to say. So I'm free.
I want to start glad you said that, because I want to start, you were raised in California, and your mom was French, your dad was Hispanic, migrated to the United States of America. So you were born and raised basically in California. Let's start there. You started, when did you start going to church? How did all that happen?
Well, when Dad came home from the service, so that'd be in 45 or 46, I can't remember the year that he came out of the service. He was in Europe. And we started living in Whittier, California. We had a little trailer court where they found a small trailer in those days, and that's where we lived for the first couple of years that I remember. And anyway, we were Catholic. My dad was actually Catholic, and so was my mother, from their backgrounds as Mexican, and also my grandmother being French. And so the Catholic was just what I accepted and was a part of. And we used to my mom and dad would walk me to church, which was about a mile away. And there was a priest from the parish who used to go and say Mass in another part of the district or the parish, and he would come by and he would see us walking to church, and so he would pick us up every Sunday to get us to the Mass. I don't know what time it was, but I was too small to remember that. But that was the first inkling, or first time I'd ever met a priest, and that's kind of inspired me. And obviously I went through 8 grades at St. Mary's School there in Whittier, and I was an altar boy, did all the things that Catholics did in those days religiously. I can tell you stories that make you laugh. I want to tell you one story. As a Catholic, you were told you had to go to Mass on Sunday. That was a number one commandment. And then on what they called holy days. Well, during the summer, there was a holy day. I can't remember what it is now, but it's in the middle of the summer, August, I think it is. Anyway, I was playing baseball, and I was away from my mom and dad. They were both working, And I think I was probably around 10 years old or something like that. Anyway, we were playing ball, and there were other boys who were Catholics. And so they asked me, had I gone to Mass? And I lied because I knew my mom and dad couldn't go to Mass, and I couldn't. So I didn't. I just lied and said, yeah, we went. And so the next thing it is, I'm going out. I'm playing a third base, and a ball is hit to me, ground ball, coming right at me. I'm ready, and it bounces, hits a rock and bounces and hits me right in the nose, and I got a bloody nose. So there I was in mortal sin with a bloody nose on the baseball field. See, so that's a Catholic story. Anybody who's a Catholic would understand that guilt and all of that goes along with that. But yeah,
the Lord got you for lying, huh?
Yeah, right. Got me good too.
Well, let's talk about you. You told me you had a little brother, a younger brother, who's passed now, but he came about 6 years later. What was his life like? I'm kind of curious as I was thinking about it. How did he grow up? You gravitated towards the church, and how was your brother's life?
Well, amongst Catholics, following the oldest son is kind of a thing that they do. So my brother was always following me, He looked up to me, obviously. And when I went away to the seminary, he thought of doing it, and he did too. He didn't follow through. I think he went a couple of years to the seminary, and then he dropped out and had his life as a businessman. He eventually worked for the telephone company, etc. But I think that's kind of the tradition that goes on with being a Catholic. That, they look up. The priesthood is held in very high regard. I'm sure it is still to this day amongst a lot of Catholics. So that was it. And so the older brother, I went away at the age of 13 to the seminary. I spent 6 years in Oakland, 4 years of high school, 2 years of college. I went to Bridal Veil, Oregon, where they had what they called a novitiate, which is a year-long indoctrination kind of thing where you learn to be the religious order that you join. And then from there, I went 3 years to Wisconsin. I was studying to be a priest, 3 years in Wisconsin, 3 years in New York. And so I was ordained in 1969 in San Francisco, California at Mission Dolores Church.
Well, how old were you when you were ordained?
I was 24 by that time, I think. Yeah, I was around 23 or 24 years old.
So you had spent the better part of 15 years.
Yep, pretty close to it. I did come home. In those days, it was still part of the old system of the seminary, and so while in high school and college, I did come home for the summer. But once I got to the novitiate, you no longer could expect getting home. But things started to change. So we're talking about the 1960s. We're talking about Vatican II and how it influenced the Catholic Church and made a lot of changes. A lot of things, some sad things a lot of people went through because a lot of changes took place. We went from Latin to English. I can name a lot of things that I saw that transition. I was a part of that. And and I did get to go home. After 3 years in Wisconsin, I went home for a month, I think it was. And they put me in Whittier, where we have a parish run by that same congregation. And so I was there for, 6 weeks. I think it was a summer anyway. And so from then on, though, that was the only time I really went home until I was ordained in 1969.
So from 1969 moving forward, when did you leave the Catholic Church?
1981. I was, as soon as I left the seminary, they put me in St. Louis. And I spent 6 months in St. Louis. That was a beautiful experience. I can tell you a story. The community is primarily black in that area, and that was during the Johnson years. Remember, they put up the housing started, the project started. So I was there in 1970, and part of the place that I was responsible for was in that area. And I remember I was coaching their softball team for kids. I think they were around 10 or 12 years old. And I had great experiences with those kids. And I remember sitting out on the back porch. Now, being Mexican, when a Mexican gets in the sun, I can turn very dark, real dark. And of course, I haven't been that way in a while. But anyway, at that time, I was with the kids, and so I was always out in the sun with them and stuff. And I was really dark complected. And I remember the boys were talking, and they said, what? They were talking about being black, And I said, well, don't you know what I am? And the kids looked at me, and they said, no. What are you? Hawaiian? And then when I told them I was Mexican, then they really flipped. They didn't know what to do.
Oh, that's kind of interesting. So you're in the ghetto. Basically, you're in the ghetto.
Right. And it was a beautiful time. I cherish every moment. That was a rough neighborhood in those days. They had a murder about once a week in that section of St. Louis. So I saw a lot of stuff in that part. And then I came out here to the West Coast in 1971, actually, January 71. I started at a retreat house that's in Federal Way, and then I spent 2 years there, and then they shifted me to Seattle. I was at Sacred Heart Church, which is right next to the Space Needle. I spent about 6-7 months there, and then they brought me back to the retreat house, and I was there until I left in 1981. And I roamed preaching in Canada, all over the United States, Texas, and we have different religious houses throughout the United States. So I would always stop at those places. That's where we would travel to, and did preaching, mostly preaching.
What happened in 1981? Well, I mean, tell me about the time when you became, I don't know, is disillusion the right word? I mean, what happened?
Well, I think it was going on. See, there were a lot of changes taking place. And if you have an image of religion, or rather religious life, there was a order, and there was certain things you did and you didn't do. But the transition of Vatican II brought in a new wave of thinking. If Catholics will remember, the nuns started to move away from the habit, the black robes and everything else, and so did the priests. I'm talking about a religious priest, though. I was not what they would call a diocesan priest, which is, he belongs to that diocese. I belong to a religious order, so I was moved around more and freer in travel. But anyway, so that era changed things, and it changed the religious life, because then television came in, more of a secular influence on that religious aspect, wanting to be one with God. Well, here now you had the distraction of movies and television. I remember, at 9 o'clock at night, everybody would run down to the TV room, what we called the TV room, and watch television, till 11 o'clock at night, whatever. I was never much of that, but it was there. And so I think that whole era just kind of disillusioned me about the wanting to get close to God, that made me want to become a religious priest or a religious person. And so I was disillusioned by what I saw was going on. I mean, the lifestyle had changed so much. I don't want to tell all of the things, but alcoholism, cigarette smoking, all of those things. I was a part of that. That influenced my life, and so I was getting more disillusioned. And I think that it made it real easy for me to leave. when the time came. I eventually became the boss of the retreat house, and I started making changes. I was starting to get different groups in, and they were doing more things, and the people that were in charge were questioning what I was doing and my way of living and stuff, and so they wanted me to move out of there and go to another place, which I did not want to go to. And of course, one of the things of religious life, you have a vow of obedience, and I said no, I wouldn't go there. And that's when I fell in love with a beautiful person, and I moved out and moved on, and I just walked away from it all. In 1981, I haven't looked back. I don't have any problem. I think the only thing that happened was I was kicked out of the religious order because they wanted to make sure I wasn't making money, saying that I belonged to their order and was receiving donations or gifts and stuff. So a lot of that stuff is there. There's a kind of a complication of things that it's hard to...
I don't want to get into all of that, but I can certainly appreciate the mechanics of what happens when you decide to move on or move away. That's kind of universal. It's called ostracize. Now, let me ask you about your parents. When you decided to leave, were they both alive at the time?
Well, we were Catholics in name only, I think. My father was not. My father was more religious in his attitude towards the Catholic Church. He was a rosary prayer. I mean, I know my father was a beautiful man. I cherish the fact, before he died, he said to me, "Mike, he's just like me." And when he said that, it was just, I melted, because I had never heard my father speak anything like that. I mean, I knew my dad always loved me and took care of me and everything. But when he said those words, that just solidified everything. And he never said one word about my leaving. My mother did not either. Some of the family did kind of question it, but I never got any kind of blowback or anything like that. So I just know I walked away.
For the sake of time, let's fast forward to...
Sure.
Let's fast forward to your life now. You're in love. You've got a relationship. You're out of the Catholic Church, but you still had a hunger for God.
Yes, and I searched for about 3 or 4 years after that. I went to every church you could imagine. Black church, Chinese church, Vietnamese church. I was all over the place looking for what I had been familiar with, a system by which you just kind of flowed in. And, of course, all of my education and everything else, I was knowledgeable about a lot of things. But I even saw that even amongst the Protestant churches that I went, there was a certain kind of system that you had to fit into. I remember going to one big church that's here in the area. This is years back when I first started. And I was asking if they need counseling. And, of course, I had pastoral counseling experience. And so I offered my services to, be on their counseling staff. But they were scared of me. And so I never got the job. I ended up doing a lot of counseling. I ended up working for the Salvation Army for a couple of years. And then had private practice through most of my life with people. I had a strong reputation of being a pastoral counselor for all the years. Okay,
so now let's jump to the time that you and I met. Now, I've listened to you tell the story, but tell the audience how you and I came to know one another from your perspective, because I have a different take on it. Well, you have to understand, you were one of many. Yeah. But go ahead.
Well, Virginia said, she liked you. and she liked watching you. You had your YouTube channel, and you were giving this thing. And I can remember. See, you got to remember, I got a Catholic background. I've studied the Scriptures. I've read the Scriptures all my life. I studied not just Catholic doctrine, but other parts, those that have studied the Scriptures. And so when I heard you, it kind of stirred me, wondering if you were Orthodox, I guess that's the word, in your theological outlook on what you were saying about the Scriptures. And so that just kind of stirred me. You know what I mean?
I think you thought I was nuts.
Well, it wasn't that bad, because you were pretty good. I mean, you were good, and I did enjoy you. It's just that I questioned things. And so I started commenting on your web. On,
is that what
YouTube
you call it? Commenting?
Yeah,
I call it antagonizing.
Yeah. Well, I was very pointed about some of the things I said, I must admit. And so that's how that's just the way I am. I'm not afraid to question or talk back at people.
Well, it's interesting because what Michael's not telling you is he was pretty adamant about questioning and challenging my perspective on things. And of course, I was coming from a Hebraic perspective, so understanding the Torah. And for those of you who know me for any period of time, this has been the biggest transformation in my life, a great big paradigm shift. So when Michael and I were combating one another online, I finally said, let's go to dinner. And I took him to dinner, and I wanted to give him some information. And I ended up giving him the Feast of the Lord presented by Pastor Mark Biltz. I was attending El Shaddai at the time, and that was a transformative dinner, if I would say so, and it solidified our relationship. We've been friends ever since. Yeah. But it all started because Michael became one of my number one antagonists online. And then something happened, Michael. Why don't you explain to the folks what happened? The dynamic of our relationship.
I just can't explain it. We watched you continuously, really did. Every video that you put out, and we got notification it was out. We would watch it, and I did enjoy it. I really did. And even though I might have had my questions, like you said, you had a different perspective than I did. And so when Virginia died, my life suddenly changed, and so I can't remember how it even came about when you asked me to dinner, but I had changed so drastically toward you, and the last couple of videos that I saw, that I just appreciated what you were doing and appreciated you. And then that night when we had that supper together, I mean, we ate, but we spent the time in the Scriptures, and I had not done that with a person in a long time. And I remember you. You had the Scriptures, and I brought mine, and we were looking at the Scriptures. Of course, mine was a Catholic translation, yours was the Hebraic translation, etc. So it just opened my heart and opened my mind, and I just loved you, and I just ate up everything that you said, and from then on, it just grew to a love of the Lord that has been expanded, especially with the Scriptures. I just love reading and understanding the Scriptures, especially the Hebraic side of everything, our traditions and stuff. And so I just grew in it.
That's really what happened, folks. As I began, for me, with the Christian community, Catholic community, we need to go back to the root of where all of this was born, and that happens to be with Israel and what God was doing through Israel. Yeah. In my mind, the Bible is about the relationship between God and Israel for the benefit of the nations. And as I was going through the various Scriptures and things that I've learned over the years and teachers that I've had, I was just sharing that information with Michael, and it was a paradigm shift for Mr. Ortega in a lot of ways. And so he would now it became more questions, and he would send me emails and ask me questions, and 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 then, of course, you started Strike Force of Prayer. We're going to talk about that in a moment. But as I was showing to Michael the scriptures from a perspective not familiar to most Western believers, that began to open up another whole conversation with you, and you pursued it. You're one of the people that pursued it. And how has that affected you? I mean, I'm talking about the feast of the Lord. I'm talking about how we view Hasatan. I'm talking about how we understand the gospel message. It's a bit different when we give the scriptures back to Israel. Would you or would you not agree?
Yeah, see, the thing, I just hit the camera off, sorry. The other thing about this is the fact that it changed my perspective on looking at the scriptures, and I wanted to delve more deeply into it, and the sources that you gave me helped me. I continued on reading, looking in different areas, especially I bought different Bibles. I bought the one that you suggested. I started reading the scriptures and seeing a different perspective on understanding God and how He relates to us and through the scriptures. And so, you know, I've grown in a love and appreciation of what is going on in this day, that there are more and more people wanting to know and understand the scriptures and the original, going back to the original outlook of the early church. And I'm talking about it's Jewish in nature, the early church, because all of the writers of the New Testament are all Jews, especially Paul, who was a Pharisee, and he was.
Is it safe to say that now you realize that their concept of what was happening is a far cry from the last 1,800 years?
Oh yeah, I'm a history person, and I love history, and I tried to see how that conflict took place and get a better understanding of what happened in the early church, and especially the whole thing of the attack towards Jewish people and all of that. That all stems from the conflicts that went on in those early stages when they moved from the background of Israel into the Gentile nations with the Greek attitude and all of that, and how that slants as you move further across Europe and into the different languages, and how they translate the scriptures and how they look at things and the traditions that grow up out of that. And it's a beautiful thing to look at and be a part of.
How would you, as a former Catholic, how would you now define the Constantine, the court of Constantine, and what his impact on really Western society? How would you describe that now?
I would say it's the same thing that happened to me in my religious life. The secular influence took us away from the closeness of God's presence, and the Roman way became they switched. They made the church become a Roman Empire, and that's where the history. You can see it in the history that Constantine actually started making the leader of the church at that time. They call him the Pope. He became a material leader as well as a spiritual leader, and then they started having their armies, they started having territory, starting having power, and just like a king. And that's why there's all those conflicts. If you look at in history, the separation of England from the Pope is because of the marriage between Henry VIII. He wanted to divorce his wife, and the Romans, the Pope didn't want it, and so the conflict is there, and that's all that separation. And the same thing goes through its whole history. That's why Martin Luther stood up, because they were actually preaching wrong. They were using Catholic doctrine to make people give money to building churches or whatever it was, and getting indulgences. All of that conflict is there, and so all of this stuff is. It's a repeating history of secular influence over the spiritual when it should be the spirit first and then the secular. The secular should be a...
We completely agree. I mean, if we fast forward to today, we're seeing the same thing. It hasn't changed. The kingdoms of men, the religious systems of men seem to predominate just about everything. And so the voice of the Lord is kind of on the back shelf, and we have chaos and corruption and all kinds of things going on in our world. But like I've always said, it's simply our turn to experience the failure of mankind when it comes to understanding the covenant relationship with God Almighty. And I think you and I are at a place now where we can completely agree on that. Totally.
Yeah. And like I said, this whole thing with the scriptures, that just opened up a whole world to me. And I love, I can talk a little bit about Strike Force of Prayer, but we have a whole area in which a lot of the people that are a part of what we're doing tend to want to be a part of those practices of the early church, remembering the feasts that you just mentioned at the beginning here of, Passover, trumpets, all of the feasts that are there. And I want to tell you, when you gave me the DVD series by Pastor Blitz,
Mark Biltz, yes.
Yeah, that changed everything. That really opened up a lot of stuff, because I watched them 2 or 3 times, and I got a better understanding of how we have walked away from truly understanding our roots of where even the feasts that Catholics and Protestants celebrate really stem from the background of the feasts that God originated in the scriptures.
It's like for me, and I don't mind saying this, we took the original and turned it into a golden calf.
Mm-hmm.
And from the golden calf, we raised up empires and religious systems and doctrines and denominations and a plethora of confusion with regard to what the feasts of the Lord are. So, but having said that, and I'm glad you tapped into that, Strike Force of Prayer was born for what reason and when? Because it happened after you and I met.
Right. I met, some people will know who he is. Mark, a friend of mine, heard me on Michael Savage's radio program. I was being interviewed about states' rights in one of his programs. And this friend was a friend of Mark Taylor, and he wanted me to be introduced to Mark Taylor. And I was also friends with Larry Nichols. Now, if people remember that name, he was with the Clintons when they were governor in Arkansas, and then he went to, then Clinton went to become president. But Larry had a moment of giving his life to Christ, and it changed everything. And so during 2016, I was part of Larry's team of research trying to help Trump with giving them information about how the Clintons and all of that turmoil stuff that they do was going on. And in the process, then I met Mark Taylor. We had a conference, the 4 of us together, this friend and Mark, Larry, and myself. And they said to me, you've got to do something spiritual out of this talk that we had. And so about 2 weeks later, my friend also said I needed a website. So about 2 weeks later, I was in a deep sleep, and I woke up at 4 a.m, and the phrase strikeforceofprayer.com came to me. I couldn't get back to sleep, so I went to buy the domain. I bought the domain, and then on a Thursday, June 1st, 2017, I started the first conference prayer call with myself, Mark Taylor, and about 4 or 5 other people.
Well, what does that mean? Let's kind of slow down, because I want people to understand You started something, and what was that something?
Okay. The thing that came to me was that we needed to pray for the nation. That was the motive. You can read it on our strikeforceofprayer.com, the mission statement. It's to pray for our nation and to pray for our government, the president, the executive branch, the judicial branch, all of the branches of government. That was the main emphasis that was given to me to pray, because we were actually, as the election was coming up, that was a part of all of this, and all of the things, all the turmoil that was going on. And so when we started that prayer, that was basically it, to pray for the nation. And like I said, I started off with 5 people, only on a Thursday. It grew to about 10 or 15 people that, they started hearing about it. On July the 7th of that year, we opened up the website, so that started to draw more people to us. And then in December, about October, I got brave and I started the second day of prayer. So Tuesdays and Thursdays are always Strike Force of Prayer prayer days for the nation. For the nation, that's our key ingredient, for the nation. Then in December, Mark mentioned us on one of his interviews on, the internet goes worldwide, and then this thing took off. It's not me, it's God's work. He's the CEO of it all.
Well, what happened? It took off. What do you mean by that?
Well, we started getting more people on the call, so then I was getting up around 50 to 75 people, I'd say. And then there were more and more people visiting the website, and they wanted to join, so we started joining. Right now, we're at 4,200 people who are members of the Strike Force of Prayer from that original 5 or 6 people that started. Now, if that isn't God, I don't know who it is, but that's how it's taken off. And everything is a part of that. And now we're also international. We have a prayer call, a Strike Force of Prayer call in Australia. I just got the guy's bulletin about what he's going to do he has a prayer call Monday night. There's one in we just got one started in Kenya. There's some people trying to get one going in India. There's one in Canada. There's one in England.
So what do you do? What you get on a phone call on a computer? I mean, what happens?
It's just very simple. It's a phone call through freeconferencecall.com, just like we're on this right now, and it's just phones. And right now, I'm averaging between 350 and 400 people on every call, Tuesdays and Thursdays. I have to put together the program for Tuesday's call, and I email that out to all of the members. And Tuesday morning, I'll start at 9 o'clock Pacific time, and people will be calling in and joining. And then we start the prayer, say a few minutes after 9, and go for half hour, allowing, I have a set program. I lead, and then there's a couple of partners with me that they also pray, and then it's open to anybody who wants to pray and add a prayer. And so that goes for roughly a half hour, and it's recorded, and it's up on our website, it's on our YouTube channel, and people are just, it's a movement of God, of prayer, unbelievable. Some of the prayers that are said, I am just, I'm moved by hearing what's in the heart of these people. And, I know that this is election season and all that. You and I are both involved in a lot of stuff. And I know that people are going to be shocked by the turnout on this election. It's going to amaze everybody how red the nation will become, because people are praying.
Well, that's Dr. Dina Dye. She also has started. It's called On Fire Prayer, and it's also blown up global. And I think that the Father is calling His people to prayer, and to pray for the things that he would have, as opposed to the chaos and the corruption and the swamp and all of the. I mean, Michael, I was talking with Dina Dye just a couple of days ago, and it can be rather quickly overwhelming at the different things that are trying to wipe the kingdom of God away.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think the voice of the people crying out to the Lord through Strike Force of Prayer, On Fire Prayer, and just people in general, and particularly Christians, and even Catholics who want more, who want to understand more of the role of what we can do, I think that's all happening. And I think one of the things that has to happen is we have to kind of divorce ourselves from a denominational attitude to become more of a citizenry of a greater kingdom and a voice in the political arena. And I think you will agree with that. And I think, like you said, Strike Force of Prayer was started to pray for the nation and to pray for what's happening in the nation. And particularly, I'm sure you would agree in the few minutes we have left in the program that the political reality that we're all praying against in order for the righteousness of the kingdom of God and the freedom and the oppression to be lifted off the people, I think that's kind of what we're all talking about, and to get back to the things that God has called us to be.
Yeah, well, it's like even in our history, we are like Israel in so many ways. We have a compact that was signed 400 years ago this year to be a nation for God. And the early church, the early founders, the gospel of Jesus Christ was essential to our documents and the things that they did. And so our nation is based on God, and we've drifted away from it. And now we're coming alive again. We're getting back to it, this whole thing with the understanding the scriptures from the Jewish traditions and stuff. See, that burns a fire in people to hunger for God and hunger for his ways and to see him back in our nation, because the nation was always founded from the beginning about God and professing Jesus Christ as Lord and no other king but Jesus. All of those things are in us so deep. And from our Catholic and Protestant traditions, our Jewish tradition, we have people from all walks, all denominations, a part of the Strike Force of Prayer. It makes no difference. Well,
I agree. I think that I think when I first began all of this about 14, 15 years ago, it was a Hebrew roots thing. It was going back and studying the Torah, and I realized that every single one of those roads is a key back to the throne of our God. Mm-hmm. And I think that if we could just kind of get past all of the discriminations and all of the bigotries and all the anti-Semitisms and realize that the kingdom of God is being raised up in this place.
Yeah.
And the citizenry, you mentioned about the pastor in New York who I connected with. Folks, for the record, I've kind of given up on Facebook, so I'm looking for other ways to do what I do with the time that I have. But it's not about being part of your denomination. It's about being part of the kingdom of God and raising up a banner for the return of our Messiah. And that, I think, is what this is all about. And I believe God is preparing us for that, and he's calling us to prayer. And I think you stepped up to the plate, Dr. Dina Dye stepped up to the plate, but others around the world are also being called to prayer. So I'm grateful, and I'm grateful to have, we started getting to know each other because you were really kind of bent out of shape about this, and now you're on the front lines.
Also, there's a part of what we do at the Strike Force of Prayer. We have what we call our Torah portion kind of thing. There's a whole set of prayer calls on Sabbath that are specifically to follow along the lines of the Torah readings. And we have one lady who is Jewish, and she has 2 or 3 phone calls where she explains to other Christians that are interested in finding out about their roots. She explains the scriptures and, the traditions, the feasts and everything. In fact, right now, that's what she's trying to do. She has a call on Thursday night and Friday night, and then a call on Saturday, a Sabbath, in the afternoon. And all of that is an explanation of the feasts that we're going to be celebrating, trumpets, Yom Kippur, etc. And so it gets us back in touch with, where our roots really are. And I always say, Jesus was a Jew. He wasn't Mexican, and he wasn't any other group. He was a Jew. And so, like you explained in your own change that took place, that's just beautiful.
It was a paradigm shift for me when I began to realize that Israel is about the vehicle that God is using to introduce himself to humanity. It's not about the Jewish people per se. It's
right.
about the reason the Jewish people exist.
Right.
And through the Jewish people, because of what God is doing, we have the temple. We have the scriptures. We have the Messiah. We have the future. And so our hope is in what God is revealing to us through Israel, which is now born again.
Yeah.
And God is reconnecting us back to the root of what he's doing. And I think you're articulating that beautifully. And this doesn't mean that being a Catholic is a bad thing, being a
right.
Baptist is a bad thing. It means that being a citizen of the kingdom is the
Amen.
reason all of these things have existed for the last 4,000 years.
Amen. It's just, and then we have a president that has opened up a door to make us one with Israel in so many ways. And look what he's doing, trying to show the Middle East that there's a friendship that can be there based on, it's just all tying together. It really is. It's a beautiful time to be alive. I have such hope. I don't care about all of the things that are going on. Yes, it's nasty communist crap that's going on in these cities and stuff. But I know in my heart, in my hope, that it's going to be okay. We're going to make it through this. We just got to stand and be who we are, citizens of the kingdom, and we want justice just as there's justice in God's kingdom. We want law and order as there is in God's kingdom. That's basically what we are as Americans. And
well, Michael, we've just got a minute or two left in the broadcast.
Yeah.
Tell folks how they can get in touch with you and also the website.
Okay, the website is called, simple, all runs together, strikeforceofprayer.com. You go there and you'll find anything you need about our prayer calls, what's going on the Strike Force of Prayer, some of the things that we're involved in, and my phone number is there. If you need to call me, you can do that. And my email address is there too, michael@strikeforceofprayer.com. I answer emails. I try to answer every call that I get to. And like I said, it's now, this is a God thing, this prayer movement, because it's international. I mean, the lady from Kenya that wrote me an email about her starting, she is so excited to do that. And we have a call in South Africa. A lady in Oregon, who lives in Oregon, is from South Africa, and her family is still there. And so she has put together a South Africa prayer call. I mean, this is God pulling his kingdom together. And, we're on the right train. Let's keep it moving.
Well, folks, on that note, I can't leave you with any more encouragement. The thing that you have to keep in mind, which is something I'm going to be saying until I can't breathe anymore, is that your involvement is critical in representing our King. And I like to think of it this way, in agreement with Michael. God created this place to dwell amongst his creation. And we are representatives of that goal. And so being involved, praying, serving, and doing the things that God has called us to do is what makes the light of the kingdom of God Almighty shine. So we encourage you. Michale Ortega, thank you so much for coming on Returning to Eden. I'll be editing the program. I'll get it broadcast. I'll send it to you.
Okay.
Share it wherever you want to share it. And I just can't thank you enough for coming on.
Oh, it's been a privilege. I love it. And remember, you have a date to come talk on my website too.
Yes,
Your turn is coming up.
I haven't forgot, okay? All right,
right.
so folks, this is Jeff with Returning to Eden. God bless you all, and we will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.